Hello and welcome back to the last episode of Learning Rust with Git Oxide. Hello, Sydney.
Well, thanks for having me one last time.
Let's see, maybe there are other kinds of shows that we can do next, but in the meantime, I think it's absolutely untrue that we saved the best for last. Because today I have to talk about macros. And I think we start with the best about macros, which might be the little book of Rust macros. I didn't read it myself. I used the Rust reference, which is, giving you what you need, but also probably lacks a lot of kind of practical examples. And I don't know, it's maybe harder to learn with the Rust reference and easier to learn with this book. So I recommend that just because it's probably better. But yeah. Anything else you want to know? Otherwise, we can finish.
I think we can probably dive right in.
Dive right into macros. Okay, so I thought instead of me trying to write a macro, and there are different kinds of macros too, I'd rather show you which macros I did write in my time with Rust, and most of them I think are indeed in Git Oxide. And they're all kind of the same thing. I think there are two kinds of macros I write, like these test macros that allow me to put down a test more quickly. It's more like this input output pattern that you can do in other programming languages too, but at runtime. And here it's compile time, and it's just a little snippet of code where you replace a few things. So an identifier here, that's the name of a function, and some input that is an expression. And that's that. It's like, I don't even want to talk about the syntax because I always forget it. It's probably super reasonable and makes total sense. But,
And maybe just let me ask a question, like why would you use a macro here instead of a normal function or like a loop? Is there an advantage to doing that?
Exactly. Is there? Because I think at some point I did write loops. The reason I did not, I unrolled the loop here, this is what that is that sometimes you want to put in some different kind of type that you don't necessarily aren't always able to express. No, I think that's not true. I think you can always do this in a loop. Okay, never mind. Let's run this. Test ref. Let's put this here. Ignore the compilation times, it's so bad. But it's not Rust, it's my setup. So I think what we're seeing here somewhere is, let's find that. Oops. Let's find this ref path with file extension. Can I find here? Ref path with, oh, interesting. Oh, this is git validate. Okay, I ran the wrong tests. Yeah, there's a ton of crates. I have a lot of run configuration for the typical things. And here we go. So that's exactly why I do this, so that you can have this nice tree of tests and see it spelled out. And you don't need that necessarily, because you can always write, like here where there is the assert, there is the, is there also a non-make test run here? No. But where there is the assert, you can also have a third parameter here that is a message. So maybe, you can just format yourself. Format syntax is supported here. So you should be able to just do this, for example, and you can, if there's a failure, you can have a nice error message that shows you more clearly maybe what's happening. Because these bare asserts that are just true or false, they don't tell you much about the context. because it's not expanded for you, usually you see left doesn't equal right if you use assert equal or assert not equal. But here you just see true should be, false should be true or something like that. But here this optional message, you can form it, and then you have a nice message that you see alongside that assertion failure. And that's something you can use in a loop as well, and I think it's sufficient. However, I guess for me, macros, they just have to be simple. And this kind of thing I still can do. I can still understand it. It's acceptable. Even though the syntax is really not my cup of tea, but I can do it. But only that, like, don't go more complicated. Just macros can be so much more. They can, crazy things. But I can't do it. Because whenever I do something more complicated or try to do even things that should be simple, macros show that they don't really, they're not a find and replace. They're not a text processing engine. Because you operate on syntax. Which means that you get syntax as input and you put it into some position where a certain kind of thing is expected. So you can't just allow anything as input and then put it somewhere in a context where it's not expected to be. And I wanted to do something simple as I wanted to have a type that is let's call it foo, and depending on my input, I thought it was a type, so I wanted to have some trait bounds here dynamically. So I had my trait bar, and it should be a dune trait. And then I wanted to add my trait bounds dynamically, so to say. And somehow I wanted it to be, just what it needs to be in order to have a version that sometimes can create send and sync within a box and sometimes not. That's all I wanted. And the idea is that this macro gets configured at compile time to either do, no, not at compile time, but to use that to do different kind of things depending on what you want. But I couldn't get it to work because I was unable to provide myself with an input that was allowed in this context here. And maybe that's not entirely correct, like what I really tried to do, but that was close to it at least. And I couldn't do it because, yes, it's not just a text engine, it's a syntax engine. And this is where it just, if it's more than this, I can't do it basically with macros. And this usually tells me use generics or try to find other ways. And that's usually even better because then you keep it even simpler and, reduce the scope a little. Yeah.
And that's the thing with macros, right? It's really just helping you to do repetitive tasks more quickly, but everything is being converted into normal Rust code, so you can absolutely do it, or just write Rust without macros.
Yes. There's this other place where I used macros, and let's just check for macro rules, see if we find it here. Somewhere outside of a test, find traits, right? So I have this extension trait. There's basically the same thing over and over, but with different names and different kinds of objects that you're interested in. So we have this object type, which can be a commit, a tree, a tag, or a blob. And all this does is find me an object and then see if it's a commit, turn it into a commit. And the only thing that changes is a bunch of types in the input and output. And sure, you can copy paste this, but of course would be really bad if you do it that often. So this is an obvious case for macros because yes, Rust is type safe, and if you just have a couple of types that you want to provide an API for, so people don't have to do that you're doing here all the time, because yeah, people could just do this, but or something like it. It's interesting that I don't use the question mark operator here. But I probably have a reason for that. Here I use it once, and then, yeah, probably there's a very good reason for that. So, But anyway, sometimes I just like to chain stuff. Really, sometimes I realize, oh my god, you really chain a lot. But why? It's actually sometimes nicer with question marks, but I digress. So what do we have here? We just have something that I could figure out, what kind of type do you need as input? A path and types an identifier, and usually it tells you when you get it wrong, it tells you what it wants in this position. So my method here, if you change this to something else, it will tell you that it needs an identifier here, I think, in the spot right behind the function.
So, okay, so then just to get this straight, those are basically variable names, and then it's corresponding like token type, or it's special type essentially that you're assigning to them.
Yeah, see, I'm so sloppy with this one, sorry. I don't even dare to explain because I think you should just read the book instead of listening to my ramblings, because I don't think I'm doing you any good here. But yes, I mean, my way is try to remember the syntax for this, then try the types. See what you remember, because that's also shortcuts here, like type for types and TT for token tree, and path is spelled out then, ident. Yeah, anyway, try to get that right. I think usually what I do is I take one version of this that I've written before, and then I paste it here, and then I try to replace things one by one. And that's usually probably the least painful, and then you can get one parameter right at a time until it compiles. Which is also a benefit because it doesn't write nonsense there. It doesn't allow you that. So you always have to get something. It forces you to do things a bit righter, but also limits you when you think things should be easy and they're not, because I don't even know. But with that Rust little book of Rust macros, I think like the tricks that you need to really use them in a powerful way, you will find them there. But then again, if I, as somebody who doesn't like them, can use them to great benefit so that I'm okay, then I guess it's also not too hard or too terrible. Yeah. But I've got this taste in my mouth with Rust macros, really. Not a fan, but sometimes things take a while. Also wasn't a fan of Bash because syntax, and also terrible to just see it go through errors and just ignore stuff and then have follow-up errors that make no sense, or until you learn the 5 things that you need to know.
I guess it's a preference then. I mean, they seem like they can be very powerful, but then maybe also a bit too complicated. Depends.
Yeah, let's say deduplicating code, that's what I would try to use them for. I don't use them for anything else. And you don't really need to, I think. One could also ask, are there macros like this in any crates that you would use? And yes, this is also a macro here. Quick error, right? This crazy syntax here, this custom syntax that you can make up, is a macro. So yes, it's actually pretty cool because the input is custom syntax. Vec, whenever you want to, I do have some space here. This is a macro. It's a custom thing, and macros you can use this or this. It's all the same to it, it's just, it's nicer to look at this when it's looking like that. And I think you can also use curlies, right? We have seen this with quick error here. This is why this works. But that's also fine. And that's also fine. So custom syntax, custom, domain-specific languages. Make hash maps on the fly. Like there is a crate that allows you to have a hash map literal, like you have a vec literal, vec macro. You have a hash map macro to do these key value associations on the fly, and this is much nicer to use. And their macros are really useful. It's just that you don't just write that on a whim. Oh, let's write a quick macro to do that. I mean, I don't. But there are crates for that if you want to look for them. And this can be useful, especially if you find yourself writing kind of cumbersome hash map initialization all the time. I think then you want a macro too. But I think you already said it all. Reduce duplication. Make it a bit nicer to write things with your own custom syntax. And that is powerful. I don't say they are not great. I just say I don't like to write them. I like to use them often, but not my own. My own kind of not great. Okay, so we had quick error. We had Git Oxide's own small ways of using them. Then there are these more powerful macros. I mean, no doubt Rust macros, they have a lot of shortcomings, and macros 2.0, they're already an improvement. I don't know, did they land already, or did parts of it land? I think they landed already. This is already the better version of Rust macros. There was one version that was worse, but yeah, I don't use them enough to really know. But code generation is an interesting topic, because that's what you sometimes really want to do. Like here, I think the most common way in Rust to generate code is this one here, derives. Because overall, you can just hand implement all of that if you want to, but the compiler does it for you. Do I have expand here? No. So if you use cargo expand, which I think requires nightly to use, then you can see what comes out of these derives. And this is what the compiler then builds for you, like the code that a compiler writes for you to make this work. And for a long time, only the compiler could do it, but that time is now over, also for quite a long time, I guess. But it's called proc macros. And these proc macros, they are Rust crates that are getting an input stream. It's just a function that you make public and give it a name, and then you have a stream, which is a token stream, and out comes the token stream. So you already see where this is going. And then usually use a syn crate, syn parse, and then you parse the stream into an ast, something like that. Just pseudocode, nothing more. And now you have, you can go through ast nodes for node in ast, and then analyze the tree the way the Rust compiler would. And then there is another, I think, the quote crate. And this allows you to use, I think, macros to have, to create a token stream yourself, or portions of a token stream, or no, create new portions of an ast maybe, by writing actual code. And then you can use kind of special syntax to say, okay, the body of the function foo here that I'm making, that then comes from your outer scope or something like that. So you have a body variable where you create these ast nodes somehow, or create a new quoted thing, something like that. So you can basically copy paste your code, make your code using macros, which feels more, to me, by the way, feels more like writing text or generating text, even though it's also with kind of syntax knowledge. So it's better than just a text generator. And then you create these ast nodes, and in the end, somehow you say ast to stream, maybe. And then you get this token stream out, and that's your rewritten code. So kind of the same thing as Rust macros, but with the power of Rust.
Yeah, that seems pretty powerful.
Yeah, it is. It's also not too complicated. Like when you look at code of actual proc macros, it's pretty okay. It's Rust. I mean, that already helps, I think. And also these quote crates, they help. I think there's also a book about proc macros in Rust, and like a primer. I never read that. I never looked at it. I kind of don't have intentions to write to do that. But because I see it as an optimization more than, convenience. In practice, of course, it's super awesome. Like, look here, this error, right? So this error, this is a proc macro. And, oh yeah, here it is. There's a bunch of grades that allow you to do all the hard work somewhere else. And then, yeah, you write some Rust code here. That's a proc macro. Here's the quoting that I was talking about. Where you create actual code and here that syntax to substitute some values into that. And here you see that this again is some sort of us node that comes out of this quote invocation, which, I don't know, is that a token stream that comes out of that? Maybe, is it a span? I don't know. I don't know. That's a normal macro here. Okay, let's go away. Let's not look at this. Okay. That's macros. Yeah, you can do a lot of stuff. I think learning by example, learning from what's out there is, I would probably do that. And then I just hack it together once I think the big picture is clear. But then again,
yeah, just based on your needs, right? If you think it can help you, then probably it's worth going through the trouble.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, for like when you write certain things and you want ergonomics that are beyond Rust, and Rust only gives you so and so much, but this kind of stuff here, right? Here's also a proc macro. No, wait, that's not a proc macro. I mean, this is a proc macro, but these attributes here, these are just attributes, and Rust, the Rust compiler passes them to you, and for you it's just some key value database, and now you can read them, and you, with your code, you do with that what you want. And this is why that works. You can make up your own little annotation language with that. And that's also pretty neat if you think about it.
I mean, especially if you're kind of building an API or something like that, it just really brings ease of use to that, right?
And I think I know what you're hinting at. You're hinting at Rocket, right? Which I think,
for example,
does that, yes, which is awesome. Rocket. I mean, do we have it here? Rocket RS with a little example on how you build how you do this. Yeah. And that's great, right? That's awesome. That's what you want. I mean, I really love everything about this website and Rocket as a crate and the ergonomics of using it. So that's exactly how you want to use these proc macros. Interesting. I think that's an older way of using proc macros. I don't think you have to do it like this anymore. Anyway, what do I know? No, you don't have to do this anymore because this error, you just use this error, right? Like these behave like normal things, so you can just refer to them by path and it works. No special macro use needed, but maybe Rocket does something special, something different, I don't know. But you can do this with proc macros for sure. And that's also cool. And that, you know, I think to me, and maybe to you, honestly, especially to you, when it's about ergonomics, you will know if something feels less ergonomic than it could be. And then you might be the one to figure things out like this and to make it more ergonomic with a little smartness that's just set on top. And that's fine, you know, and that can make all the difference, I think, because this, like if you would do this by hand, Rocket wouldn't be that special anymore. I think it would be kind of cumbersome and but like that, it's better.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, to me, the idea of macros definitely feels like really cool and something I think I would want to use. But yeah, maybe there's some sort of barrier. Like when you actually get into using them, like you said, it's not as easy as you think. That's kind of frustrating a little bit. But yeah, I guess I'll just have to see.
Yeah. Don't feel discouraged by me. I'm more of a, you know, I have so much to do that really doesn't, where macros don't help at all. It's just out of my current range. But maybe one day it won't be anymore, and then they're great to have. Okay, that's proc macros. That's standard Rust macros. Is there anything else? Yeah, there's a ton of things to learn about macros in general, I guess. It's more like, that's the practical uses. Like I'm a consumer of macros, of proc macros, two kinds. Quick error. Let's have a look at quick error. this. Yeah. Here. So that's one big mean macro. Still not done. Still working on it. Wait for it. Okay. Okay, 1,000 lines of macro. Yeah, that's a thing of nightmares for me anyway. Interestingly, I can't do this here. Okay, but I did contribute. I wanted to show that my name shows up somewhere because I did contribute to this crate to make it ready for more recent Rust editions because I use it and I like it, and it's awesome for, you know, it has super fast compile times, and that's what I use it for, and it saves you a lot of writing for simple error types, and it does one thing really well. And I use this instead of this error. I think we talked about this in our error handling session. Because it has this advantage of fast compile times, whereas whenever you do anything with proc macro, you probably boost your compile times to 10 seconds. Or 4 if you use modern hardware. So I don't know, I didn't actually measure compile times anymore, but it really is, if you're
feel it.
You totally, you don't want that. It's so annoying. But the thing is, once you have one proc macro crate in your dependency tree, then yours don't cost anymore because they all have the same kind of basic requirements when it comes to the crates they use to do stuff. Which means then you can use this error. This is why Git repository, for example, uses this error, because Git pack, for instance, has to use Git error, or Git ODB has to use Git error, because it needs a feature that only this error has. And this means Git repository, you know, can make use of this. It's just more convenient because nobody pays for that anyway. It's already, you have to pay for it if you want to use Git repository because of the crates it pulls in. Yeah. I think that's maybe all the segue I can give back to the beginning, where it's all about, oh my god, I hear my fans. My fans are on. Okay. Okay, so I think this is it. I hope you can find some awesome words for this last episode of Git Oxide. If you want to find them, be my guest. Learning Rust with Git Oxide.
Yes, exactly. I mean, it wasn't as much Git Oxide as we thought at the beginning, I remember. But nevertheless, I think definitely a very, very good overview, and a lot that came out of it, for me at least. And yeah, definitely enjoyed it.
Thank you. I hoped you would say something like that, because, you know, it's all ad hoc, it's all just improvised, and I think you have to do this 10 times until you get something that is really, really awesome. So for now, it's just our first attempt. A second attempt, of course, shall happen very soon, where we learn Git Oxide with Git Oxide, which should be easier to, you know, have a reason to bring Git Oxide in. That should be no problem this time. And just see how we can make, like, how Git Oxide is organized and how you can understand it, how you can use it, and I guess getting the big picture overview, and then looking into how you would actually want to use Git Oxide as a consumer of its API. And yeah, let's see how many episodes we need to do that. I'm curious and look forward to it.
Absolutely, me too.
Then thanks everybody for watching, and I hope you see or you watch the next season as well when we dive into Git Oxide itself. Thanks a lot, and see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.